President Cyril Ramaphosa will set out government's policy direction for the 7th administration and deliverables for the year ahead when he presents his State of the Nation address tomorrow evening in Parliament. This year's SONA comes at a time when South Africa is faced with a high unemployment rate standing at 32.9% in the third quarter of 2024. It's really hoped that President Ramaphosa will give a detailed clarity on a country's strained foreign relations, high costs of living, and of course plans to tackle this slow economic recovery. To find out about what labour unions are expecting from tomorrow night's SONA, we're joined by Zwelinzima Vavi, the Secretary General of the South African Federation of Trade Unions, and Zanele Sabela, who is National Spokesperson from the Congress of South African Trade Unions. So good to have both of you. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much, Leon, for having us.
So let me begin with you, Zanele. Your expectations, how much of them were met from the 2024 SONA commitments?
Okay, so I think Eskom has done a lot in terms of progress. I mean, we're coming from a situation where we had load shedding for 12 hours a day, and now virtually no load shedding for 300 days until this weekend hit, which is a reminder that Eskom is still actually quite vulnerable. And so government needs to support Eskom to make sure that, it plugs those holes in terms of corruption, making sure that it secures its infrastructure, and making sure that it can actually invest in its generation capacity. Similarly, we'd like to see Transnet receive the same kind of support in terms of debt relief to make sure that, the minute Transnet works effectively, then we'll know that that will trickle through to mining, to manufacturing, to the agricultural sector, which are very job-rich in terms of, the jobs that they can create for the economy. So it's very important. Also, Metro Rail. Metro Rail needs to work efficiently because it transports workers, millions of workers daily. We're also looking at SOEs. The post bank, the post office has been having quite a rough time. And so it was promised at 3.8 billion to make sure that the business rescue business plan that has been formulated, it's implemented. We're also looking at the SDR grant. The ruling recently that actually said that it should be permanent and that a lot more people should be receiving it. But then we hear that the Department of Social Development is going to appeal that. But then for COSATU, we've always said that in terms of that, it needs to become the basic income grant. First, it needs to be taken up to the food poverty line, which is about 795 rands, and then it should then be made into the basic income grant. We're also looking at the fact one of the wins actually that we can, as COSATU, we can brag about is the implementation of the two-pot system. And just how much, though it was heavily criticized, it's amazing how many workers have actually taken that up. And last figures are showing about 43 billion has been drawn out of the savings component. So that's one feather in our cap. We're also looking at we had a bit of a scare early in January when we were told that community works programs, the people there who are working, who are over 55, will be taken off come end of January, and that has been extended until March. So those programs need to be ramped up and they need to be reconfigured so that they provide a pathway to decent jobs and to acquiring skills so that people are not so dependent on them.
All right,
and that's some
Zanele,
of the things we are thinking about.
I think you've given us some sort of good both expectations from what we'll hear from the president, but also those that we've seen happening from the 2024 SONA that the president did deliver. Zweli, I'm going to ask you the same thing. Perhaps maybe not double up on what's been said, because certainly I imagine you feel the same about certain aspects. But, from 2024, other aspects that you feel have been achieved or have really not made any progress?
Well, we want to focus on the big issues. The big issue is that the economy of South Africa remain that we inherited from the colonial apartheid era. It has not been restructured. We have been demanding that this economy be overhauled so that it can be based on meeting the most basic needs of our people for jobs, for elevation of poverty, for addressing of the inequalities. And on that score, we're not expecting any change from the government of national unity. Instead, we are expecting the intensification of the neoliberalism, bearing in mind that in the main, the government of national unity is a coalition between a neoliberal ANC and anti-transformation right-wing Democratic Alliance. And the combination of those two, we have said, will spell a disaster for workers and will be a true doomsday.
Yeah.
And we're not wrong in that we see neoliberalism is intensifying. The privatization agenda has been put on the first or on the last year, and the budget cuts and austerity programs have become more like a norm, and the devastating impact of that economic program is felt by the marginalized majority, and the black majority who remains the face of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. We still, Leanne, we want to again appeal to you to always use the expanded definition of unemployment, which is sitting at 42% as we speak, and with the youth unemployment of those below the age of 25 still hovering around 68%, and the unemployment of black people is hovering at around 47%. This is a disaster in anybody's imagination, and we expect the government not to turn back from the promises they have made to the IMF, World Bank, and the rating agency. So we expect very bad news for workers in Transnet, and who are going to see 20% of the company privatized and handed over to the private sector. Workers in the harbors who will expect more concessioning out to the private sector. We expect the agenda of consolidating all of the state-owned enterprises into a single company so that it can be listed in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in order to facilitate privatization, basically. We expect that to be taken in the top gear. Eskom has been a disaster for South Africa, the working class and the poor. Whilst everybody else have been celebrating the 10 months of an end to the load shedding, the reality of workers and the poor in the townships, rural areas, is that they have never seen an end to load shedding, now called in another name, but it still remains the same, the disruption of the economy, the disruption of their lives, and opening up of the most marginalized members of society to even greater levels of crime.
Yeah.
So we are not hopeful. We will not be proven right, because all the indications are that all of what we call the structural fault lines of the past 30 years of democracy will unfortunately continue tomorrow.
Yeah.
The government is refusing to learn from the disastrous route it has followed for the past 30 years.
And it's certainly, I mean, obviously giving it not too much of optimism, but I know from SAFTU's perspective, I mean, you've called for the establishment of a living wage that allows workers to meet their basic needs and live in dignity. Do you foresee this happening anytime soon? Zweli, very quickly, please.
Well, there are thousands of workers. Even the community works program workers are being sent to the doldrums to join the 12.2 million people who are unemployed already. And the community healthcare workers' future is uncertain even after scoring a major victory in the courts, which we celebrate, that the court have ordered that they be employed on a permanent basis, and we can only hope that the Western Cape government in particular is listening and will implement that court decision. And the decent work agenda, Leon, is not on the table in South Africa. Let's be honest. There is no agenda of driving industrialization. There is no agenda of nationalizing the mines in order to build secondary industries. There is no agenda of using our land productively to ensure that we have food security, and in addition, that we address the crisis of poverty and insecurity in the rural areas. And that's what we must be mobilizing against with the communities.
Zanele?
And that's why on the 19th of February, we'll be holding major demonstrations, hopefully as the labor federations in Nedlec, with the communities to protest against the prosperity, the austerity measures and the budget cuts. So we're asking the communities in the Western Cape to please join us in Cape Town as we protest against the slaughter and attacks.
We'll talk more about that. Obviously, that's coming,
and
that's coming when the budget happens at that time. I have to wrap this up. Unfortunately, there's no time for this. But Zanele, one of the big things for COSATU is, of course, the solidarity and the aligned stance with Africa. Let's perhaps, because something no doubt that the President will mention in the State of the Nation address is SANDF's mission in the DRC. Perhaps we can just get a closing statement from you on this very quickly.
We're expecting the President to actually talk about a political solution to what is happening in the DRC, because we cannot continue to sacrifice our soldiers the way we have been, and also the resourcing of the national of the South African National Defence Force. It's something that he does need to speak about. It's the austerity that Mr. Vavi is talking about that has actually resulted in the cutting of budgets, including of the SANDF, and so that needs to stop. And but then on a happier note, at the end, today we are celebrating the national minimum wage, which is going to start in March this year. It's gone up now to 28.96 rand. So we are happy about that, and it's something to celebrate. People used to, farm workers, domestic workers used to be paid like 6 rand an hour, and now we're sitting at the point where we see that slowly it's going up and keeping up with inflation, although it is not much, but slowly it's setting a floor, and we need to, employers need to be aiming for more than the floor, but at least it's giving us standards to aim for, to strive for.
Zanele, thank you. Thanks for joining us, Zwelinzima Vavi as well, SAFTU, and Zanele Sabela from COSATU. Thank you, both of you, for weighing in on this conversation.